Had a buyer request a install video on my two-stage trigger system. So here you go. This is a pumper tube. The install is identical for CO2 tubes with the exception that this cup washer isn't included or needed with the CO2 tubes. And you can get away without using it on the pumper tubes if you're willing to file down your sear or some other modification to the sear. So first thing you want to do after you have the gun disassembled is to install your hammer. And one difference that I do versus a normal Crosman hammer is I make the hammer pin kind of a press fit. So rest it in there lightly and grab a mallet. Sometimes this isn't necessary. It comes down to the microscopic differences between each hammer pin. They're not always identical, but just give it a little tap with this brass mallet here and seat it into the pinhole and make sure that it just operates fore and aft freely and cleanly. Put your spring in. And what I like to do when I'm doing installs like this is put a temporary screw up top like so. It just makes it so that the hammer cover doesn't fly off. There's only one real gotcha with the two-stage trigger, and that is when you install it, you want to hold the trigger in to allow the sear to go down. You don't do that and it's held up and it can bind in here and you can actually break it. So when you get to the point where you're tightening the screws down, make sure you're holding the trigger in. I like to do the front screw first. Oh, do I not have a valve? Oh, I don't have a valve on this one. This is just a piece of, or it's just an empty tube. Typically, you would do the front screw first and thread it in to the valve. I don't have a valve in here, so it's actually threading into nothing. But it doesn't matter, because what's important is the back side. Screw goes in first, cup washer goes on top of it. Bring it up here like this. And this is a number 2 square hammer. These are screwdriver. These things are worth their weight in gold. You can get away with doing this with a slotted, but if you can see this, this will take a slotted screwdriver, but there's a lot more biting action with the number 2 square. I sell these. You can get them anywhere, but it also works better with the grips not installed because you're off to the side here a little bit, and with the grips installed you're more like that. So just something like that. Anyhow, back on. This back on. And just work this until it bites. Now, that's not fully tightened, and I don't have the front screw in at all, but this is where you want to hold the trigger in. So safety off, and I don't know if you heard that. There is a minute little click there. Now you can hear it. That's the difference. So trigger in, and you don't have to keep holding it, just after it's fully seated. So after it's fully seated, then you can release, holding up here, whether it's the screw or your thumb, just so that it's tight so that this doesn't bind and break the sear. But anyhow, back to this. Now you can just tighten this all the way. And you can see, I don't know if it's going to show up on the camera or not, but the cup washer is seated correctly. And it just gives just a little bit of a gap. And you can't see it, but there is a gap there, and it allows the sear to engage the hammer properly on the smaller diameter pump tubes. Again, none of this is required on CO2 tubes. But that's it, and I like to test. I test these before I ship them, and without a breach, I just do something like that, and then just very light pull. Compared to the OEM trigger, the pull's just phenomenal. I don't have a fish scale to test it, but that's got to be a pound. It's very light. That's it. And if you ever want to disassemble this, the pin probably won't come out without pliers, and preferably pair of vice grips. Bite into this sideways so that the grooves of the vice grip jaws bite on the pin, all four corners, kind of like a pair of V-blocks if you have any machining experience. And then just wiggle that pin out of the opening back here. Having this press fit just makes for a better, longer lasting operation. But there you go, that's all it is.